True power doesn't shout. It walks in silently and commands the room. You've been told to speak louder. I'm here to show you why silence speaks loudest. If you want to be unforgettable, don't try to impress them. Make them feel your absence in your presence. A lion doesn't need to roar for the jungle to respect its presence. Neither do you. You've been lied to. Taught that in order to earn respect, you must raise your voice, explain yourself, or prove your worth again and again. But the Stoics? They uncovered a deeper law, one that modern psychology confirms today. Power is not in noise. It's in presence. When you enter a room and say absolutely nothing, yet the air shifts, heavier, quieter, sharper, that's not coincidence. That's presence. That's dominance without desperation. Because while noise is often a mask for insecurity, silence is strategy. It unsettles. It disarms. It forces the world to listen without you ever having to speak. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The best answer to anger is silence." Not because silence is passive, but because silence is control. And control is the root of fear, respect, and quiet confidence. In this journey, we'll uncover why silence unsettles the insecure, how your mere presence can drown out words, and how psychological boundaries, emotional mastery, and spiritual discipline will make you untouchable. They won't fear you because of what you say. They'll fear you because of what they can't predict, what you withhold. You see, true power has never been about volume. It's about the weight you carry into a room, the energy that follows you, the calm that rattles people far more than rage ever could. The Stoics lived this truth. Marcus Aurelius ruled the mightiest empire of his time, but his greatest strength wasn't his crown or his commands. It was his restraint. While others shouted in the Senate, he sat in quiet command, leading not through noise but through presence. He wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And that is the essence of control. Not reacting, not stooping, not explaining, but outlasting, out-disciplining, out-calming the chaos. Because presence, that unshakable stillness, is what makes a man unforgettable. Words fade, but presence lingers. Your stillness plants questions that torment the insecure. Why is he so calm? What does he know? What kind of strength doesn't need validation? Psychologists call this the projection effect, when your silence becomes a blank canvas. People begin to project their fears, doubts, and insecurities onto you. And that's when your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back everything they can't control. The Stoics called this state ataraxia, a calm so deep, nothing can shake it. Picture this. A storm howls. Winds scream. Lightning rips the sky. But the mountain doesn't move. That's you. You are not here to dominate through debate. You are not here to perform. You are here to embody stillness. And from that stillness, command respect. This kind of presence isn't given. It's forged. In solitude. Through boundaries. Through emotional discipline. When you stop reacting to every insult. When you no longer justify yourself to people who don't matter. When your peace cannot be stolen by chaos, you become a mountain in a world of leaves. And that is the beginning of true Stoic power. When you stop trying to prove your worth, people begin to feel it, without a word. Now think of it this way. The loudest person in the room? Often the weakest. They betray themselves with every sentence, each word soaked in desperation. Their endless explanations reveal not confidence, but insecurity dressed as noise. They fight to be seen. They scramble to be heard. But then, there's the one who stays silent, who simply sits, watches, listens. They don't chase the spotlight. Yet somehow, all eyes fall on them. That is presence. Because presence isn't about being noticed. Presence is about being felt. Marcus Aurelius in his meditations reminded himself daily, Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one, and that is the essence. Presence isn't talking about strength, it's embodying it. It's your posture, your discipline, your stillness when others are shaking. That's how you speak without words. That's how your self-worth radiates without noise. Because here's the truth, if you don't know your value, you'll constantly try to prove it, you'll explain, you'll defend, you'll argue. You'll react to every slight and chase every insult. But once you understand your worth, deeply, immovably, you no longer chase validation. You don't need recognition. You become recognition. People feel it even if they can't name it. And that unsettles them. Why? Because most people are slaves to reaction. They can't stand silence. They can't stand stillness. They thrive on chaos, on a constant loop of performance and proving. So when you choose to exit that game, when you stop dancing to the rhythm of their drama, you reveal just how weak the game really is. The Stoic approach to presence is simple to understand, but brutally difficult to master. Master yourself. And the world will bow without you speaking a single word. Epictetus, once a slave who rose to become one of the greatest Stoic teachers, said it best: "No man is free who is not master of himself. Freedom is presence. Mastery is presence. And that kind of presence, it's untouchable. It cannot be manipulated, predicted, or provoked. So ask yourself this: do you want to be remembered for the noise of your words, or the weight of your presence? Do you want to keep draining your energy trying to impress those who will never truly care? Or do you want to stand so calm, so composed, that their own insecurities expose themselves in your silence? The Stoics have already drawn the path. Presence is not performance. It is discipline. It's about standing tall, quiet, unmoved, while the world drowns in its own noise. And when you understand this, when you begin to live this, you'll realize something powerful. Silence is not empty. Silence is presence, and presence is power. To the weak, silence is unbearable. Why? Because silence can't be argued with. It can't be twisted. It can't be controlled, and people fear what they cannot control. That's why silence terrifies far more than shouting ever could. It's not a void, it's a mirror. And when you don't react, when you don't explain, when you don't rise to their bait, you force them to face themselves. And what they see, they often can't bear. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." And that's where the line is drawn. Weak minds react impulsively. They lash out. They gossip. They fill the air with noise, not because they're strong, but because they fear stillness. But strong minds, they sit calmly in the silence because they've already conquered the loudest battlefield, their own mind. It unsettles those who rely on reaction to feel in control. And when you master that silence, you step beyond their reach. Now consider this. A manipulator needs your reaction like oxygen. The insecure, they live for your validation. Toxic people, they feed on your attention like parasites. But what happens when you give them nothing? No anger, no explanation, no defense, just stillness. They unravel. Their strategy collapses because their entire game is fueled by your energy. This is why silence is more than absence. It's a boundary. A firm, invisible wall they cannot scale. Psychologists refer to this as uncertainty anxiety, the fear of the unknown. When you yell, they can interpret it. When you explain, they can twist it. But silence leaves them alone with their own mind. And that's far more terrifying than any insult. They begin to spiral. What is he thinking? Why isn't she reacting? Did I lose control? That questioning eats at them deeper than any argument ever could. They're left wandering in the dark. And in that darkness, they meet a fear they've long tried to outrun: themselves. Marcus Aurelius understood this power well. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this. and you will find strength. Weak minds don't possess this power. They're addicted to noise. They constantly seek reassurance, approval, some proof that they matter. And when you refuse to give them that, they're confronted with a truth they can't bear. They're not in control. Have you ever noticed how the loudest one in the room is usually the most insecure? They can't tolerate silence, because silence would reveal the hollowness behind the performance. Noise is their shield. Words are their mask. But silence? Silence shatters the illusion. It leaves them exposed, naked, vulnerable, and afraid. And this is why emotional intelligence is critical. When you understand the psychology behind silence, you stop wasting energy on people who aren't worth your words. You begin to realize silence isn't weakness. It's a weapon, a strategy, one that destabilizes the insecure while protecting your peace. Seneca once said, "He who is brave is free." To sit in silence, to resist reaction, to refuse to explain yourself, that requires courage. The weak will call it coldness. They'll label it arrogance. But in truth, it is freedom. Freedom from their chaos, freedom from their manipulation, freedom from the endless loop of trying to explain yourself to people who never cared to understand you in the first place. This is why silence feels threatening to them, because silence isn't just a lack of words. It is the presence of power. Your refusal to engage sends one clear message: I do not need you. And for those who crave control, that truth is unbearable. You cut the lifeline. And when you do that, you become untouchable. Picture it: a crowded room, voices shouting, egos clashing, insecurities bleeding out in every direction. Then you walk in. You say nothing. You react to nothing. You simply observe. And slowly, the noise dies. Heads turn. Questions arise. The energy shifts. Without a single word, you've taken control of the room. That is the Stoic art of presence. Weak minds fear silence, because silence makes them look inward. And most people are running from themselves. They cover their emptiness with small talk, their fear with gossip, their weakness with volume. But when you remain calm, still, unshaken, their disguises fall apart. They drown in the silence you carry, because your stillness becomes a mirror, and what it reflects, they can't handle. So remember, this silence is not your burden. It's theirs. Your calm is their chaos. Your quiet confidence is their deepest insecurity. And the more you master the art of silence, the more their true weakness reveals itself. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to expose them. All you have to do is stay silent. You don't need to expose anyone. Their own fear of silence does the work for you. In every room, in every conversation, there are always two kinds of people. The first type, they radiate calm, grounded power without saying much. Their energy speaks louder than their voice ever could. And the second, they try desperately to prove their importance through endless talking. They brag, they interrupt, they explain things no one asked them to explain, all in the hope that someone, anyone, will validate their worth. One type embodies quiet confidence. The other bleeds loud insecurity. The Stoics saw this contrast clearly centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." He understood that real presence isn't something you announce. It's something you become. It's shown through action, restraint, and composure, not through speeches, not through self-promotion. To be strong doesn't mean shouting about your strength. To be truly confident doesn't mean seeking recognition, because real confidence doesn't need a crowd. It doesn't ask for witnesses. It simply exists, and only insecurity is loud enough to try and mimic it. Insecurity fills silence with noise. It brags to mask emptiness. It reacts, not to clarify, but to prove it still matters. The insecure can't bear stillness, because stillness becomes a mirror. And what they see in that mirror is fragility. So what do? They create noise, arguments, gossip, performances, self-praise, all of it, just hoping others will mistake the volume for strength. But here lies the paradox. The louder they become, the weaker they appear, because those who are truly powerful don't compete for attention. They attract it naturally. Their silence becomes magnetic. Their calm presence becomes a language that speaks louder than any shout. Psychology calls this status signaling. People who feel powerless try to overcompensate. They dress louder. They speak more than they listen. They exaggerate accomplishments. They perform. Meanwhile, those who are secure in themselves don't need to perform. They conserve their energy. They speak with purpose. They let their grounded presence do the talking. This is why quiet confidence earns respect, and why loud insecurity often earns pity, or worse, ridicule. Imagine this. Two generals stand before battle. One is shouting, pounding his chest, trying to look unstoppable. The other says nothing. He scans the horizon, calm, focused, giving nothing away. Now ask yourself, which one do you fear more? Exactly. The noise might impress a crowd, but the calm one? He terrifies his enemy because stillness is unpredictable. It holds mystery, and people fear what they cannot read. This is the Stoic path. Emotional intelligence over impulse. Inner peace over drama. Self-worth over constant validation. The man of quiet confidence, he cannot be provoked. He doesn't waste energy proving himself. Why? Because he's already won the most difficult battle, the one within. Once you've mastered yourself, no one else can master you. Seneca once wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." And it's true. Quiet confidence is not born from ease. It's forged in fire. Built through discipline, refined by hardship, and polished by self-restraint. It's not arrogance. It's assurance, a deep knowing that nothing outside you can shake what you've built inside. But loud insecurity, it crumbles under pressure. It lives for approval. And when that approval disappears, it panics. The insecure argue with shadows. They fight battles that never needed fighting. They chase applause like beggars chasing coins in the street. And the more they speak, the more their weakness shows. Here's the truth. The world does not respect those who beg for attention. It respects those who hold it without effort. It does not admire those who shout to be heard. It admires those who can sit in stillness, calm, composed, while the noise burns itself out. This is why quiet confidence feels dangerous to others. Because it cannot be predicted. It cannot be manipulated. It does not bend to approval or fear rejection, and when you carry yourself with that kind of energy, people will fear you without knowing why. They'll sense something immovable, untouchable, undeniable, a strength they cannot copy, because it cannot be faked. So how do you build this? You start by setting psychological boundaries, and you refuse to explain yourself, especially to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Previously, we uncovered the power of psychological boundaries, how refusing to explain yourself protects your energy. Now we take that deeper. How your inner peace, when guarded like your most precious treasure, becomes your greatest source of power. It starts here, by treating your inner calm as sacred, by practicing spiritual discipline, by learning to sit in silence without fidgeting, without reaching for distraction, by choosing restraint over reaction, by cultivating self-mastery over ego. Because remember, confidence whispers, insecurity shouts. The insecure will always try to prove, but the truly confident, they never need to. When you walk into a room with quiet certainty, you don't have to demand space. You become the space, and that kind of presence. It can't be bought, it can't be borrowed, and it certainly can't be faked. Not all languages are spoken. Some are felt. Through how you walk, how you sit, how you hold eye contact without flinching. Long before humans had language, we survived by reading signals. The narrowing of the eyes, the stillness of the body, the posture that said, "I fear nothing." And even now in the modern world, it's not your words that command respect. It's your presence. The Stoics understood this without needing a study to confirm it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, act with dignity. Don't waste time in empty talk. Seneca warned, "A wise man doesn't speak of his wisdom, he embodies it." And Epictetus, once a slave with no title or wealth, walked into rooms and made men of status fall silent. Why? Because authority isn't in volume, it's in being. Modern psychology agrees. Studies show that more than 70% of communication is nonverbal. Words may distract, but the body reveals truth. Confidence is seen in your posture. Emotional control is shown in your breathing. Inner peace is reflected in your stillness. And here's the hard truth. You can't fake these things for long. People sense authenticity. They feel it, often before they can even explain it. That's why silence combined with presence is more powerful than any argument. Picture a soldier standing motionless as chaos explodes around him. He doesn't scream. He doesn't flinch. His calm is the command, or imagine a master negotiator. He says little, but his presence pulls the entire room toward him like gravity. He controls the tone without raising his voice. That is the language beyond words. Quiet confidence, psychological control, self-worth that radiates without explanation. The insecure, they fill the silence with noise. They fidget, cross their arms, over-explain everything. But the confident, they embrace the silence. They sit upright. They breathe slowly. They hold steady eye contact, not to intimidate, but to project calm certainty. And that stillness, that calm, steady silence, it unsettles the weak far more than aggression ever could. There's a reason why predators in nature don't roar before they strike. The lion stalks in complete silence. The eagle hovers above without a sound. Power doesn't make announcements. It reveals itself at the right moment. Words can be twisted, but presence cannot be denied. That's why the Stoics valued action over talk, discipline over drama, stillness over chaos. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be tolerant with others, but strict with yourself." And that inner strictness, it shows in how you sit, how you walk, how you refuse to be rushed into proving anything. When you've mastered yourself, your presence becomes immovable, and people feel it. They feel it when you enter a room not with arrogance, but with calm. They feel it when you let silence speak for you. They feel it when you no longer need to prove, because your very existence is proof. This is why building spiritual discipline is not optional. It's essential. Without it, silence looks like hesitation. But with it, silence looks like power. The difference lies in the energy behind your silence. If your silence is fueled by fear, people will feel unease. If your silence is rooted in strength, people will feel authority. And that difference? It changes everything. We explored the difference between silence rooted in fear and silence rooted in strength. Now we go one step further. How your silence, when paired with discipline, becomes a force no one can ignore. Because silence on its own is neutral, it's not powerful by default. It's your discipline that makes it powerful. It's your composure that turns silence into a mirror. Think of your presence as a clear, still lake. You don't speak. You don't react. You just stand there, calm, centered, unreadable, and then something interesting happens. People begin to project themselves onto you. The liar assumes you're watching their every move. The arrogant assumes you're unimpressed. The insecure assumes you're judging them. You haven't said a single word. You haven't lifted a finger, but in saying nothing, you've forced them to look inward, to face their own fears, flaws, and insecurities. That's the beauty of the language beyond words. It speaks louder, deeper, and more truthfully than language ever could. Your body speaks. Your silence speaks. Your self-control speaks. And this form of communication? It's universal. Across cultures, across generations, across time. Why? Because as humans, we fear and respect what we cannot predict, what we cannot read, what we cannot control. And that's exactly what your silence becomes when paired with deep self-mastery, unreadable and unshakable. That's why you don't need to beg for respect. When you build this kind of presence, respect comes without being asked. It arrives uninvited, so stop chasing words. Stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Start mastering the language beyond words. Master your posture. Master your stillness. Master your silence. Build an aura so grounded in self-worth, so rich in emotional intelligence, so radiant with quiet confidence, that people feel it before you even open your mouth, because here's the truth. Words fade. Arguments are forgotten, but presence remains. And the kind of presence you carry, it lingers long after you've left the room. Power isn't measured by how loudly you speak. It's measured by how little others can provoke you. Because the moment you lose control of your emotions, you hand them the keys to your mind. But when you master emotional control, you become untouchable. Your silence transforms into more than just a tactic. It becomes a fortress. The Stoics placed this emotional discipline at the very core of their philosophy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And he was right. Because the world will test you with insults, with betrayal, with manipulation. But none of these have power unless you react. The weak lash out. The insecure over-explain. But the disciplined, they remain still. And that stillness, that calm that doesn't flinch, it terrifies those who seek to control you. Think about it. Manipulators feed off reactions. They want your anger, your defensiveness, your emotional outbursts. That's their leverage. But when you meet their chaos with silence, with stillness, with a face they cannot read, you deny them oxygen. And when they can't breathe, they suffocate in their own noise. Your refusal to react becomes the ultimate display of dominance. And psychology backs this up. In any conflict, the person who controls their emotions controls the frame. That's what emotional intelligence really is. Recognizing your feelings without being ruled by them. Instead of being pulled into chaos, you stay centered, and this steady presence destabilizes people. Why? Because most people expect escalation. They expect shouting. They expect drama. But they have no defense against calm neutrality. They don't know what to do with someone who won't bite the bait. Seneca said, "He who angers you, conquers you." Every time you explode, you surrender. Every time you lash out, you show them they own a part of your mind. But every moment you stay calm, every time you resist the urge to explain or fight back, you take that power back. And it's this internal ownership, this control over your emotional world, that creates an aura of respect and fear. Without a single word spoken, picture this. Someone insults you. In front of everyone, the insecure would immediately react, defend, fight back. But the Stoic? He doesn't blink. He meets the insult with silence. Maybe even the faintest knowing smile. And then the crowd begins to shift. Because suddenly they all realize the one who says nothing holds all the power. We saw how calmness in the face of chaos becomes your greatest weapon. Now watch what happens when that calm silence flips the entire situation. Suddenly, the one who attacked you, the one who expected to dominate you with noise, looks small. Why? Because the silence you maintained, shifted the power dynamic. The one who tried to humiliate you is now humiliated by their own lack of control. They shouted, they raged, and you remained still, and that stillness became your sword. This is what a psychological boundary looks like at its peak. It's when you decide what enters your mind and what doesn't. You choose who has access to your peace and who does not. And when you build this kind of emotional armor, you become unmanipulable. People's words may land, but they fall like arrows against stone. Heard, yes, but never piercing. But don't mistake this strength for something that comes easily. It doesn't. This level of presence takes work. It takes spiritual discipline. It takes practice. Deep breathing through anger, pausing before reaction, remembering that every provocation is a test, not a command. Discipline is what transforms silence from passivity into power. And here's the paradox. Silence without emotional control is emptiness, but silence backed by mastery is dominance. The difference? Inner peace. If your silence is born from fear, people will smell weakness. But if your silence radiates calm certainty, people will sense strength without understanding why. Presence doesn't come from simply saying less. It comes from carrying more discipline. That's why the Stoics saw life as training. Every insult, every betrayal, every failure wasn't an attack. It was practice. Practice in control, practice in restraint, practice in rising above. They believed, if you master yourself, no external enemy can ever truly harm you, because then your silence is no longer a reaction. It's a choice. And choice? That is the essence of freedom. When you no longer need to shout, to argue, to prove you are free. And that kind of freedom makes you unreadable, unpredictable, untouchable. That's why people fear your presence, even when you haven't said a word. Because deep down they know, nothing they do can shake you. So ask yourself, who holds the real power? The one who shouts the loudest, or the one who stands unmoved in the storm? The answer is clear. Power belongs to the one who commands himself. Master your emotions, and you master your presence. Master your presence, and you master the room. And when that happens, they will learn to fear you, not because of your anger, but because of your calm. Because boundaries aren't always spoken. Sometimes the strongest boundary is silence, the refusal to explain, the refusal to justify, the refusal to waste energy on those who do not deserve it. When words fail, presence draws the line. Most people believe boundaries have to be declared. Don't cross me. Don't treat me this way. But the Stoics knew better. Boundaries aren't what you say. They're what you allow. And when you allow nothing that disturbs your peace, your silence becomes your loudest declaration. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "There is a tranquility that comes when you stop caring what they say, or think, or do, and care only about what you do." This is the essence of true boundaries. You stop playing their games. You stop explaining yourself to those who never wanted to understand. You stop proving yourself to people who never planned to respect you. Instead, you choose silence, and in that silence, you become unshakable. Think of silence like a closed door. When you refuse to argue over nothing, you shut the door. When you walk away from manipulation, you lock it. And when you stay calm while others rage, you build walls they cannot climb. These are psychological boundaries, lines drawn so clearly, they don't need explanation. And yes, the insecure will hate these boundaries. They crave reaction. They feed on your words, your anger, your energy, because it makes them feel powerful. But when you give them silence, you give them nothing, and nothing is unbearable to the weak. The silence you uphold becomes the unexpected ending they never saw coming. When you don't react, don't explain, don't let your emotions get pulled into their game, they begin to spiral, trapped in the very chaos they once used to control others. They stumble, they doubt, they lose the illusion of power. But the truth is, what terrifies them most isn't you. It's themselves, mirrored back by your silence. Psychologists call this phenomenon extinction of reinforcement. When someone is used to receiving a reaction, whether praise, anger, or explanation, but suddenly gets nothing, their behavior begins to unravel. Manipulators thrive on attention. The more silent you are, the more desperate they become. And eventually they wilt under the weight of your refusal to engage. But make no mistake, silence is not surrender. It's not passivity. It's spiritual discipline. You will feel tempted to speak, to justify, to defend. But the Stoic chooses restraint. Because the moment you try to explain yourself to someone who thrives on chaos, you hand them control. The moment you argue with a liar, you legitimize the lie. The moment you react to a manipulator, you confirm their power. Boundaries spoken can be twisted. Boundaries lived through silence cannot. Seneca once wrote, "It is the power of the mind to be unconquerable." And boundaries born of silence are exactly that, unconquerable. No one can distort your words when you offer none. No one can cross your line when your very presence becomes the line. No one can rob your peace unless you hand it over willingly. Picture this. Someone insults you in public. They push your buttons waiting for you to explode, but you remain calm. You say nothing. You look at them once and then turn your gaze elsewhere. The energy in the room shifts. The crowd senses something. The attacker suddenly looks smaller, exposed. You never had to shout, never had to argue. Your silence set the boundary. That is the quiet force of presence. This is why emotional intelligence is so crucial. It teaches you when to speak and when not to. It helps you discern the battles worth fighting from the ones meant to steal your energy. The Stoic does not waste energy on every war. They only fight the one within. Discipline over impulse, self-worth over validation. And in doing so, your silence becomes a fortress. Every time you refuse to react, the walls grow taller. Every time you walk away without explanation, the gates grow stronger. Every time you protect your peace, you fortify the kingdom of your soul. And one day, no one enters without your permission. Why is this kind of silence so feared? Because in a world desperate to prove itself, you prove yourself by not needing to prove anything at all. And that paradox, that refusal to play the game, is the greatest boundary of all. There is something more terrifying than confrontation. It's absence. Silence that lingers long after you've left. A presence that haunts even when you're nowhere to be found. That is ultimate power. To live so untouchably that your memory becomes their prison. People expect battles to end in noise, in yelling, in closure. But when you give them none, no closure, no explanation, just silence, they're left with one thing only, the echo of their own conscience. And conscience never sleeps. It never forgets. It whispers at night, reminding them of what they did, of who they lost, of the respect they will never earn back. They thought you had vanished. But in truth, you simply became so silent, so grounded, they could no longer erase you. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." And that is exactly what turns you into a ghost in their mind. You don't react the way they expect. You don't meet chaos with chaos. You don't fight fire with fire. Instead, you become still, calm, detached, elevated. And in that contrast, they're forced to face themselves. Not because you expose them, but because their own mind does it for you. This is what psychology calls intrusive regret thoughts. Those uninvited memories that replay over and over. Every time they encounter someone strong, composed, and quiet, They will think of you. Every moment they feel out of control, your presence, rooted in silence, returns to haunt them. You don't need to send reminders. You don't need to confront them. The mind is its own executioner. People haunted by guilt and regret end up destroying themselves from the inside. Because silence, when rooted in emotional intelligence and discipline, is not absence. It's amplification. It sharpens your image. It magnifies your memory. It becomes more terrifying than anything you could have ever said aloud. Picture this. A predator thought they had broken you. They walked away, convinced you were shattered, defeated, done. But then, without warning, you rise, quietly, gracefully, with composure and unshakable dignity, and suddenly you're no longer the prey. You are the storm they never saw coming, and storms don't make announcements. They arrive. They devastate, and they leave a permanent mark. That's why quiet confidence is so unsettling. Because it can't be bought, can't be faked, can't be defeated. Those who carry themselves in silence are unreadable, unpredictable, feared, not because of what they say, but because everything about them speaks strength, and nothing reveals their weakness. But let's be clear. Becoming the ghost they can't escape has nothing to do with obsession or revenge. It has everything to do with self-mastery. It means building a life so rooted in discipline, so radiant with peace, that their efforts to diminish you now seem laughable. You don't haunt them because you try. You haunt them because your existence is undeniable proof that they failed. Seneca said it best. The greatest revenge is to live well, and to live well in silence. In strength, in your own lane, is the kind of ghost that follows them everywhere. They see you in your success. They feel you in their failures. They hear your silence louder than all the insults they once hurled at you. Imagine it. Years later, they enter a room. Someone casually says your name. Their chest tightens. They force a smile. But deep down, regret pierces through. You're not even there. And yet somehow, you're everywhere. Not because you tried to haunt them, but because your growth, your calm, your unshakable presence has become a shadow they can't outrun. That's the paradox. The less you chase, the more they're haunted. The less you explain, the louder your silence becomes. The less you try to make them regret, the deeper their regret grows. Because regret can't be forced. It's born in the vacuum you leave behind, and your silence is that vacuum. So your mission is not to punish them. It's to rise, to thrive, to embody emotional intelligence and spiritual discipline so completely that you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. When you live like this, you become untouchable in body and unforgettable in mind. They will fear your presence, even when you're silent, because your silence has become eternal. History has shown us this truth again and again. Silence is not emptiness. It is strategy. The Stoics knew it. The greatest generals used it. And in today's world, it is the quiet ones who command the deepest respect. That silence you've built, forged through discipline and composure, has now become a mirror. And that mirror unsettles them. Do you know why silence makes people so uncomfortable? Because it forces them to confront themselves. While you remain still, above the noise, beyond their chaos. Picture a courtroom. When the judge walks in, he doesn't need to raise his voice. He doesn't slam his hand or shout for order. He simply sits, calm, unmoved, and the entire room falls silent. That's respect, born from presence. Now imagine a manipulator. Someone who used to feed off your reactions. You're arguing. You're defending your frustration. They thrived on your words. But one day you stopped speaking. You let silence be your shield, and in that moment, they lost their weapon. This is the first lesson. Silence strips your enemy of their advantage. Words can be twisted. Actions can be mocked. But silence? Silence is untouchable. And here's the twist. The more they try to interpret your silence, the more they project their own insecurities onto it. The more they speculate, the more they unravel. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." So stop explaining who you are. Become it. Let your silence be the loudest declaration of strength. Because when you carry yourself with inner peace and quiet confidence, people feel it, even if you never say a word. And that feeling? It inspires both respect and fear. Why? Because human beings crave clarity. They need feedback, validation, confirmation. But when you deny them that, when you set a boundary using nothing but presence, they begin projecting their doubts onto you. They start to fear what they can't read, and they respect what they can't shake. Your silence becomes their mirror, and very few can handle what they see. Think of how predators behave. Wolves don't attack the strongest prey. They look for the weakest, the panicked, the scattered, the reactive. But what happens when they encounter stillness? A creature that doesn't flinch, doesn't bolt, doesn't tremble? They hesitate. And that hesitation is your advantage. Silence doesn't just protect, it attacks. When used with discipline, silence shifts the entire balance of power. Picture this. You're in a noisy room. Arguments fly, people gossip, voices clash. Everyone's desperate to be heard, but you sit quietly, calm, still, and slowly, eyes turn to you. People wonder, why isn't that person reacting? And that curiosity becomes respect. But beneath that respect, something deeper stirs. Fear. The fear that you see more than you say. That you know more than you reveal. That's the paradox of silence. The less you show, the more powerful you become. Words can expose your intent, your weakness, your desperation. But silence reveals nothing, and what cannot be read is always feared. Seneca once warned, "If you are easily provoked, you are easily defeated." Silence is the antidote. It proves you are not ruled by emotion, not manipulated by noise. You govern yourself, and because of that, you command the room. That kind of emotional intelligence demands respect in ways no speech ever could. And respect often walks hand in hand with fear. Not the fear of violence, the fear of irrelevance. When you don't react, when you refuse to bend to provocation, you send a message so clear it needs no words. You do not control me. You do not define me. You have no power here. And that realization terrifies them. But understand this. True silence is not about withdrawing from life. It's about mastering yourself in the midst of it. It's spiritual discipline in motion. The Stoics didn't preach isolation. They taught us to face the world with such steadiness, such composure, that nothing could shake us. And when you live this way, your silence becomes a force field, a boundary stronger than any spoken warning. So when your silence becomes a force field, unshakable and steady, something remarkable happens. It shields you from manipulation, and it sends a signal of inner strength that speaks louder than any defense ever could. And that strength, it provokes a dual response. The honorable will respect you, the corrupt will fear you, and either way, you win, because you're no longer chasing approval. You're no longer explaining, defending, or proving anything. You simply embody what matters. You walk into the room and bring presence, not noise. You don't fight with insults. You don't argue with the petty. You fight with silence and win without lifting a word. And understand this, silence, when wielded with discipline, is not about pretending to be untouchable. It is the result of becoming untouchable through self-mastery, through mental training, through the daily decision to choose calm over chaos. When you enter a space, your silence carries weight, like thunder that rolls through without warning. And when you leave, it lingers, like an echo that keeps them awake at night. What they fear most isn't what you said. It's what you never needed to say. Because real power isn't just control over others, it's control over yourself. And silence, when mastered, becomes the ultimate frame, the invisible structure through which your presence commands a room. The weak try to dominate with noise. The strong shift energy with stillness. Think of life as a series of frames, invisible contexts that shape every interaction. Most people, they're stuck reacting within frames set by others. They get pulled into gossip. They argue back at insults. They explain themselves when accused, and every reaction is evidence that someone else is pulling their strings. But the moment you stop reacting, the instant you choose stillness over impulse, you flip the frame. You become the one who decides the tempo, the one who sets the boundary, the one who redefines the energy in the room. This is the essence of the silent frame of power, not needing to respond, not needing to explain, just existing, steady, composed, grounded. And as you hold that space, others are forced to adjust to you. Marcus Aurelius understood this perfectly. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Your silence is the living embodiment of that truth. By not reacting to the noise around you, you demonstrate absolute mastery over the one thing that truly matters, yourself. And that kind of mastery, it becomes both respected and feared, because psychologically people fear uncertainty more than confrontation. When you argue, they understand your position. When you fight, they can measure your limit. But when you stay silent, they know nothing, and that nothing becomes terrifying. The human mind hates a void, so it fills silence with fear, with assumptions, with projections. And in that swirl of uncertainty, your image grows larger than life. You become unreadable, and what cannot be read cannot be controlled. This is why silence is such a potent weapon against manipulators and narcissists. Their power depends on drama, on drawing you into their emotional chaos. They thrive on your reaction, your defense, your explanation, your anger, but when you offer none of that, when you stay rooted in stillness, you starve their game of oxygen, you step outside their frame and pull them into yours, and in your frame, silence rules. Silence becomes the line they cannot cross. It becomes the weight they cannot lift. It becomes the discipline they cannot match. And here's the final truth. Silence doesn't just command fear. It commands respect, the kind that cannot be faked. It shows people that you are deliberate, not reactive. Focused, not frantic. Anchored, not swayed. In leadership, in life, in relationships. That presence is invaluable. Because the one who speaks the least often sees the most. And the one who doesn't need to shout is already being heard. After everything, when you no longer need to speak to assert yourself, when your presence alone makes others hesitate, that is the peak of silent power. A silent leader doesn't have to raise their voice. Yet they command more authority than the loudest in the room. Why? Because silence, when paired with inner certainty, creates a gravitational pull. And when people trust in your stillness, you no longer have to convince them. You simply exist, and they listen. But let's be clear, the silent frame is not about passivity. It is about intentional control. You choose when to speak, when to act, and when to say absolutely nothing. Silence is not weakness. It is restraint. And in a world addicted to noise, restraint is power. Seneca once said, "No man is free who is a slave to his body." In the same way, no one is powerful if they are still a slave to emotion. Silence breaks those chains. To live within the silent frame is a daily discipline. You train for inner peace so you don't flinch at provocation. You strengthen your psychological boundaries so your power isn't handed away. You build unshakable self-worth, so you never feel the need to prove yourself, especially not to those who are unworthy. This is not a performance. It's a way of life, and when mastered, it radiates from you naturally and effortlessly. Picture this. You walk into a heated negotiation. Everyone is raising their voices, trying to assert dominance, but you sit in stillness, observing, not a word. Minutes pass, and your silence grows heavier. People shift in their seats, glance your way. They wonder what you're thinking. You haven't spoken, yet you've become the center of gravity in the room. That is the silent frame at work. Ultimately, the silent frame is about transcendence, rising above the petty, above the noise, above the exhausting cycle of reaction. You choose clarity over chaos, mastery over emotion, and in doing so, you become untouchable. Because silence isn't just absence, it is presence. It's the invisible frame that holds the entire room together. The quiet weight that tilts every interaction in your favor. The force that makes others respect, even fear, you, without a single word. When you live inside that frame, you no longer chase power. You become power. Silence is not a tool you use occasionally. It's a discipline, a lifelong practice that shapes your character, sharpens your mind, and elevates your spirit. To wield silence once is impressive. To live in silence with mastery is unstoppable. Most people treat silence as accidental, an awkward pause, a reaction when they don't know what to say. But the Stoics treated silence as a weapon of virtue. Epictetus taught, "Let silence be your general rule," or say only what is necessary and in few words. This wasn't about hiding. It was about cultivating strength through restraint. Discipline is the bridge between intention and power. Anyone can stay silent once or twice, but only those with true inner peace and spiritual resilience can make silence their way of life. Because silence is not just about staying quiet. It is about mastering the storms within, so the outside world cannot drag you into chaos. In today's world, this kind of discipline is rare. Everyone wants to be heard. Social media is filled with noise, outrage, and constant opinion. People confuse volume with influence. But real influence is not measured by how many words you shout. It's measured by how deeply your presence shifts the energy of a room, how your silence shakes the insecure, and how your restraint, maintained consistently, protects your dignity. The discipline of eternal silence requires training in 3 dimensions. Psychological boundaries. You must decide whose words deserve your energy, and whose don't. Most don't. When you stop reacting to insults, lies, or manipulation, you teach the world one thing: your mind cannot be invaded. Self-worth. When you know your value, you stop explaining. You stop defending. Silence becomes your natural language now because approval is irrelevant. You stand rooted in your identity. And to sustain that silent strength, you need one final pillar: emotional intelligence. Because anger and ego demand noise, while wisdom chooses stillness. Emotional intelligence doesn't mean you're immune to provocation. It means you see the bait and refuse to bite. You recognize manipulation but refuse to let it dictate your behavior. Your silence is not suppression. It's a conscious redirection of energy. And when you master that, silence transforms from a momentary tactic into a permanent state of strength. Let's be clear. Eternal silence is not the absence of communication. It is the art of speaking only with precision, with purpose, and only when necessary. It's choosing stillness in the face of chaos, calm in the face of attack, dignity in the face of disrespect. This kind of silence doesn't shrink your presence, it magnifies it. Picture a warrior who doesn't swing his sword recklessly. He waits calm, composed. His silence is more threatening than the enemy's screams. And when he finally strikes, it is deliberate and unstoppable. That is the discipline of silence. You conserve energy. You preserve your strength. And when you move, your actions carry undeniable weight. That discipline also brings liberation. When you no longer feel the need to speak, to prove, to react, to defend, or to explain, you are finally free. Free from the noise of others. Free from the endless cycle of emotional reactivity. Free to live with clarity and focused intent, and that freedom radiates through everything you do. Seneca once wrote, "He who is brave is free, and silence is bravery. Bravery to resist the urge to fill the air with noise. Bravery to endure the discomfort of stillness. Bravery to choose presence over volume. And that courage gives rise to a freedom that cannot be shaken. Over time, your silence will become legendary. People won't remember exactly what you said, but they will never forget how your presence made them feel. They will remember the weight of your calm, the sharpness of your stillness, the way you walked into a room, unshaken, unbothered, needing no applause. That is the mark of true greatness, not noise, but timeless composure. The discipline of eternal silence isn't about disappearing from the world. It's about standing right in the center of it, while storms rage around you, and remaining unshaken. You are not silent because you are weak. You are silent because you are in control, because your strength is too valuable to waste on chaos, because you understand. The loudest force in any room is often the one that says nothing at all. And when you live this way, when silence is not just a strategy but a lifestyle, you will never need to demand respect, to intimidate others, or to beg for recognition. The world will give it to you instinctively, because when silence is mastered, it becomes eternal power. They wanted you to speak, to explain, to defend yourself. But you chose silence, and in that silence, you discovered the most dangerous form of power, the power of presence. Now, when you walk into a room, they feel it. And when you leave, the echo of your silence lingers, louder than any voice. They fear you not for what you said, but for what they will never again be able to take from you: your control, your discipline, your peace. Remember this: noise fades, words are forgotten, but the memory of your calm, unshaken presence will haunt them forever. This is the essence of Stoic mastery, self-control so absolute. It commands respect and inspires fear without uttering a single word. So the choice is yours. Continue chasing approval in the noise, or master the discipline of silence and let the world bend to your stillness. If this message speaks to your soul, carry it with you into every battle, every room, every storm, and let them see. Let them feel that you are no longer controlled by noise. You are silence. You are presence. You are power.